Well, hello friends, this here is David Vos. Today is March 23rd, 2016. It's good to see everybody today. Well, today I wanted to get back into a little of this history. We kind of stopped talking about that. We got basically up to the United States and the Constitution. So I wanted to get back into that a little bit because there's something that that you need to know. Because a lot of what I'm going to tell you in this video is basically stuff that you're not going to be able to verify. And so there's going to be a lot of you that are just not going to like what I'm going to say, because you're going to say, where'd you get this information? You have no idea what you're talking about. But nevertheless, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some stuff that's not in the history books. But it's important because it's about you and I. It's about who we are and where we are and why we're doing it. And we've been learning about our past, which also covers who we are, where we are, and why we're doing it. But we need, a final revelation of this thing. We need verification. A lot of you are just kind of walking in the dark and you're not sure what to believe. Some of the stuff I've said has made some sense and kind of rings true, but you're not sure. I think if you watch this video, it's going to help explain a lot of this for a lot of you, because it's going to put some of the finishing touches. It's like when you paint a picture and you're just painting away, and before you get finished, sometimes you don't even know what. People will come along and say, what are you painting? I can't figure out what you're painting there. And then finally you get to the last little spot and you put that last little leaf on the tree, and all of a sudden the whole picture becomes alive and you understand, I get it. See? So we really got to figure this out. We've got to get it. It's important that we understand why we're here, because we're being deceived and we've got to wake up. The only hope we have is if we wake up. But we will. Don't worry. And this is one of the things I'm trying to explain to you guys, is that we're going to make it. Jesus didn't come here for nothing. He didn't just come down here and die and say, well, I guess the devil might win. That's what a lot of you Christians are saying. It's like, oh my goodness, the world's coming to an end and the devil's going to win. He's going to come up out of the bottomless pit and destroy the whole world. Well, of course, the odd thing about a lot of this is that most of us nowadays have been finally convinced that it's actually God who's going to come down here and destroy us all. The whole boat's been turned around, upside down, right? We're sinking. And when we get to the point where we think it's actually our Father in heaven that has this hatred and anger for us and has been ruthlessly chasing us down to the end of time, and he just can't wait to throw us all into hell and burn us forever. It's a very sad, sad thing, friends. It's a very, very sad thing indeed. Because, you see, the entire history of mankind is about this deception. A lot of you just don't understand, why in the world would we be deceived? Why did the Father allow us to be deceived? What's going on? Why don't Jesus come down here and fix it? Why is he letting the devil do this? You see, friends, the answer to this question is, you all know, if you go back into your Bible, you'll see that Jesus came to the earth and he told them, he gave them the answer. He says, I could bring legions of angels right here, right now. I'm not scared. I'm not helpless. But I need to teach my children not to be afraid. I need to teach them that the real important thing is the inner man, the spiritual man, and love. And that you need to turn the other cheek and to love your enemy. And Jesus didn't just talk about it. He said, now watch. They're going to kill me now. And I'm going to go willingly, like a lamb, to the slaughter. Because this Jehovah, he's ruthless. And he wants our blood. He hates us. And if that's all it was, we would just take him out of the way. The problem is he's deceived a lot of humans that they're worthless. And he's deceived a lot of people into thinking that they can't make it. They're like scared and they're just shaken, right? And they're full of these deceptions, these demons. So Jesus says, what I've got to do is take this dragon. It's just a monster. It's an illusion. I got to get it out of your mind. See, this illusion's been placed there The carnal flesh has got to be overcome, and you can't do it physically. You can't win the battle physically. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're spiritual. So Jesus came to show us how to conquer the real enemy, which is death. He showed us how to conquer the real enemy, which is fear, to have faith, and to show our love in the spite of every evil, wicked, nasty thing that comes our way. And this is the only way we're going to conquer. So Jesus willingly laid down his life out of love for us. And it says this is real love, when you can lay down your life for your neighbor. So you see, we're winning. Even though millions of us have died in 2 inquisitions and 2 world wars and one that's actually in progress, millions of people are dying over there. We're winning. That's the neat thing, is that we can't lose, because we're on the winning side, because we can't die, because we're in Christ, and we passed over from death to life, and there is no condemnation in us, and so we're not judged, and we're not wicked, and we weren't wicked from the time we were born. But let me get into this history. So we talked about how in 70 AD, and remember, Jesus had said when he was alive and around 30, he said, this generation will not pass before all things take place, and everything will be fulfilled that was written by the prophets. Okay, now you have to remember this. If you're a Christian, don't be fooled by these modern false prophets who are telling you that all these things have yet to be fulfilled. If that's the case, you're not saved, because all the prophets prophesied of your salvation, and that's already been taken place, and all the prophecies were finished in Christ. He fulfilled it all in his body on that cross, and the entire book of Revelation was fulfilled right down to the last words that Jesus spoke on the cross when he said, it is finished. And he conquered the dragon, the false prophet, and the beast. And that is not what you think it is. You see, it is the carnal flesh that's deceiving you. And all the wicked forces in heavenly places, like fear and hate and lust and envy and strife, those are the things that he defeated on the cross. And he went into hell, into that bottomless pit, and he defeated them. So, because of his defeat, Anu stepped down in 70 AD. And in the heavenly realms, which you and I are not privy to, we cannot see, they tried to make Jesus king of the world. But Jesus said no, not yet. Because there's still a lot of struggles going on in the human psyche. And mankind needs more time to experience these forces and overcome these forces. And I'm going to be with them throughout this time. But for now, they set up an interim king upon Nibiru, and his name was Nanar. And of course, this was to last 2,000 years, because this is how long each one of these ages lasts. They're an astrological age, and each one is 2,160 years. So Jesus told his disciples that when they saw a man with a water pitcher, that would be the person who would show them where the great festival is going to be, the supper, the Last Supper, and they would be with their Lord there and eat with him and drink with him. And he would have a room all prepared for them in an upper chamber. And he was talking about the man with the water pitcher is the Aquarius man in the sky. He was talking about the Aquarian age. And so, after 2,160 years, we will go into another age. Now, in those periods of time, there are kings and queens that are on the earth, and wars and fights and different things that go on. But in the heaven, there's these other beings that are fighting over this world. Now, the Bible talks about this in the book of Revelation. It talks about this bottomless pit. You see, remember, Christ conquered the devil and his demons in hell. and he bound them there. This is symbolic of the flesh being defeated. But it may be defeated. See, Christ defeated it in his own flesh. But each of us now have got to be able to have Christ born in us. We've all got to defeat the flesh and overcome it. This is why I kept saying, I have overcome, so don't worry. You're going to overcome too. So mankind went forward, and Marduk decided to usurp the authority of Christ. He didn't want to go along with this, I'm defeated thing. No, he wanted to make human beings his slaves so they would mine gold for him. Because, see, that's what originally happened. When these Anunnaki came here, there were 200 of these Iggies that began to take humans and breed with them so that they could make a race of slaves to do all the mining for them, so they didn't have to work in the mines, because they wanted to take this gold. See, why were they mining gold? What's the deal with gold and silver? Well, we know today it's precious, but why? Human beings think, oh, this stuff's precious, and they wear it on their hands, everything. We don't know why it's precious, because for us it's just a piece of metal. For some reason, for a long time we've considered it very precious. And the reason why is because the gods wanted it. It was very precious to them. And we found out right away that if we had gold, we could get a lot of money for it. So, why did the gods like gold? Well, now we're in the modern 21st century, and we find out that computers require silver. It's a conduit, an electrical conduit. So you see, this is very important to advanced technological societies. Gold being a precious metal, and silver, and all of these metals actually, tin, and they use tin to make aluminum, different things that were used in their manufacturing and so forth. They needed these metals. So that's all Marduk was really interested in, was slavery. And if human beings became enlightened, you see, it didn't matter to him one way or the other. He didn't care if you're enlightened or not. The only thing is if you get enlightened, then you're not going to be a slave no more. He needs slave labor. Now, that's one thing that Jesus can't do nothing about. If somebody comes along and deceives you, all he can do is try to enlighten you. But you are an individual free agent, and you have the right to be deceived or to be intelligent. And so a lot of this has to do with just your own free will, your integrity, and your courage. Because see, we have to develop this like a muscle, our courage. And we have to overcome. So, in the universe, there's such a thing in the broader universe as the prime directive. You don't interfere with any evolving species or any beings. You don't interfere in their own free will. And those who are highly advanced, spiritually advanced, not technologically advanced, but beings that are highly spiritually advanced never interfere in another person's free agency. They do acts of love, and they guide others by example. This is why Jesus came here and died, turned the other cheek, and did it all by example. You see, he knows the outcome. He knows what's going to happen. See, you've got your soul is a very highly precious commodity on the universal stock market, friends. There's something going on down here you never really knew. You didn't understand. Your soul is being bought and sold. It says that in the book of Revelation, chapter 18. They're buying and selling your soul. For what? For gold and precious things. It's right there. Revelation chapter 18, friends. And Marduk, he just wants precious things. He wants money. He wants power. He wants your soul, because it's very, very precious, because you're a slave. You're his cattle. He's a very powerful elite financier in the universal stock exchange. And he's got some very powerful technically advanced beings that are not spiritually advanced, but technologically advanced, that are purchasing and using us as little pawns. So Christ came down here to give us life by enlightenment. So we talked about in the Middle Ages and how he did that. Well, we can go back to when he was on the earth. He didn't bring down legions of angels and fight. He turned the other cheek and he went to the cross. And so in the Dark Ages, this blood that was shed on the cross was seed. When it hit the ground, it began to just sprout. And his disciples took that message and that gospel, and then they were martyred. That was like seed. And thousands began to be enlightened. And they set up the mystery schools, and they were the Gnostics, the Cathars, the Bogomiles, and they went forward throughout Europe and they taught the gospel. But they were pacifists. They wouldn't fight back. And so, in the heavenly places, Marduk didn't like that. And so Christ would start on earth enlightenment and teaching and libraries and schools, democracies. And Satan, he'd just come down here and invent matches and gunpowder. That's all he needed. Matches, gunpowder, and burn all the libraries so people didn't get enlightened. And deceive them so that they thought it was a good thing. See, somehow you got to deceive the slaves to think that they should fight on the side of the elite. If they hide their identity and the slaves don't know who the elite are, then they end up getting deceived and start fighting for the elite. This is what's happening in our country right now, and I'm going to explain that to you guys. But we need to talk about how it all led up to this, the history. Because you see, they burned the libraries, the Alexandrian Library, 295, Constantinople Library, the library in Baghdad. All these libraries just kept getting burned down. And then the Catholic Church started this, and the Nicene Council and all these various councils where they made these edicts that you had to do what they say and you had to believe what they say. And then they started these rumors about anybody who didn't do what they say or possessed of the devil, and they started lying about them, saying they were killing babies in the basement. And so they would get good people to go out there and gather these people up and murder them. They've got so scared of these enlightened beings that when Galileo said the earth was round, they wanted to hang him on a cross. How dare he say truth? Because they thought that electricity was witchcraft. See? But they wouldn't have thought that. But you see, this is how Marduk worked. He deceives people. Gets them all riled up. He lies to them. So, every time a library would fall, those who were fearlessly trying to teach the truth and enlighten the world would have to move somewhere and build another library. And this just kept going on and on. But as we said, the darkness comprehends not the light. They're just deceived. They're ignorant. They don't know what they're doing. They're just enraged with their lust and their passions, and they think they're doing the right thing a lot of times. But they're really on the side of darkness, and they don't understand the light. Jesus said the light is in the world, but the world loved darkness rather than light. He says, I've come to give you light. Oh, you people, you have little faith. And he went to the cross. He says, I hope that many of you will learn, and I hope you'll learn fast to love one another. This is what we got to do. And there's no other way. But the evolution of your soul is done with love. And you'll get there, little flock. The Father has given you the kingdom. And he gave us the example to turn the other cheek, and he walked away. And then he's been fighting. Michael and his angels battled with the dragon and his angels. There's been a war going on. It's a spiritual battle. And these things have been going on down through the ages. So they got to America. This was all planned out. We talked about how in ancient times there was a thing called Atlantis. This is where, before the flood, Enoch brought the mysteries down and had the mystery schools and taught all this great wisdom. And this is where we got astrology and the sciences and all these things. But of course Marduk didn't like this. He wanted to destroy him. Just like he wanted to tell Adam and Eve that they couldn't have knowledge, right? Now he wants to tell the world that, no, you can't get to heaven. You can't become like God. You gotta just mix up their languages so they don't understand one another. Keep them down. No enlightenment. Because if they ever get enlightened, then it's over. See, gig's up for Marduk and his angels and his devils. So, he looked over there, and I'll be darned if the enlightened hadn't got on boats. In 1492, they sailed the ocean blue because, you see, this was, remember now, there was all this enlightenment in Spain. Right? Because the Christians wouldn't allow, the edicts of the Catholic Church, they wouldn't allow enlightenment in books. They burned them. You couldn't learn anything or think for yourself. But down there in Spain, because the Muslims took from Morocco on up into Spain and took a whole country of Spain. And so they were free there. And so the Essenes had schools and libraries, and they were sitting around there with Muslims and Christians and everybody just, Jews and everybody together and learning. And this is where they started writing the Zohar and the Kabbalah and ancient wisdom. And this is where, through these teachings, Sir Isaac Newton and Galileo and Copernicus and all these people got this wisdom. And they were teaching the world. So they had another great war. And you've heard the whole story. We did all that history and how that happened. And they finally went on boats and they came to America. Well, when they got to America, they brought boats of these Essenes, these Israelites, ancient Israelites. Not the old Jews that's running the world today. These are fake Jews. But the real Israelites, the seed of Abraham. They were down there in Spain, the Essenes. They were teaching and enlightening the world. And they got on boats and they went to Mexico and South America. And there, the surnames of Gonzalez, Rodriguez, Garcia, these are ancient surnames of the Essene Israelites. And it was divine providence that they came here, because our Father in heaven had a plan. Same thing happened in Europe. The Waldensians, they were just massacred, right? And so the Pilgrims came over to America and landed in North America. That's why the book of Isaiah says in prophecy that Zion would come back in the latter days. And it even describes where it would come. In Isaiah chapter 18:1, it says, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, which is beyond the rivers of Goshen, across the Goshen Valley, the little rivers of Goshen. You stand in Palestine and you look across to Africa. Through the gates of Gibraltar, you go to the Atlantic Ocean, which is where Atlantis was. That's why they called it the Atlantic Ocean, because they knew that's where the ancient Atlantis was. The ancient kingdoms of the phoenix bird. Originally in America we call it the phoenix bird. Now we've changed it to the eagle because we've got eagles over here. We don't have phoenix bird because that was only a symbol. But it's that bird with the outstretched wings, the symbolism of the phoenix. It goes all the way back to the ancient teachings that were taught there in Egypt, which goes further back to Atlantis. And so in Isaiah 18:1 it says, ho to the land with the outstretched wings. That's the land of the phoenix. And this is America. And it was by divine providence kept in reserve for the latter days, where no king would ever rule upon this land, where our Father in heaven would have a place prepared to bring the gathering of Israel. See, that's a remnant of all the children of our Father in heaven from all over the world, to create a kingdom of love and peace and goodwill, of liberty and justice for all. And this is why they came over here and they started making schools and libraries and roads, and we have democracy. And that doesn't mean capitalism, friends. There's nowhere in the Constitution that talks about capitalism. Free trade, sure. Free everything. We live in a land of freedom. See? We'll talk more about that. So Marduk looks down and he says, oh my goodness. See, the angels desired to peer into these things. They didn't understand the Father's plan either. See, he didn't reveal all this because he couldn't reveal this. So Marduk found out he'd cut him off at the pass. So a lot of this was just not yet revealed. On a need-to-know basis, our Father in heaven used certain people to carry out his will. We are his vessels. And we're doing the Father's work by loving one another and feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, healing the sick, and casting out the demons, which is the deceptions, and teaching people, freeing people. This is our work, friends. This has always been our work, to love one another. So we came here, we started the Constitution to do such a thing. So remember, all the population of the world was basically over there in Asia and Europe. And South America and North America was over here by itself, and they didn't have a lot of books. Today we look back in history books and it doesn't talk a lot about South America and stuff like that. So now we know that there were very few people on the North American continent. And most of this great civilization that we see down there with the Aztecs and the Mayans, that was not that long ago. The pyramids in Egypt are like 12,000 years old, friends. those pyramids in Mexico aren't that old. They're only like, they were only abandoned just a few hundred years ago. Now, you can find out a little bit about this story by reading the Book of Mormon. This is a story about how way back when the Israelites were scattered in all the earth, a group of them came over to America. Now, that's not the same group as the ones down there that we know today as the Aztecs and the Mayans. The Book of Mormon is talking about the North American Indians. But they're the same basic peoples. And they have some of the same stories and some of the same traditions. Because you see, he's taken the seed and planted it in all the earth. And so the Rodriguez and the Garcias and the Gomez and all of these other names from Spain, they come over as a part of the divine plan of our Father in heaven. And the Pilgrims came over, who were also from other lines, this great seed that would come to America. And by divine providence, they're coming over from Mexico now, and we're all coming into this country. But you see, Marduk's always got a plan to try and destroy this work. And once people got educated and they got their freedom and they got their rights, he knows they're not going back. So he's got to try and deceive them somehow. So, in 1607, they brought some slaves over here. Now, a lot of you think, well, the Constitution says that all men are created equal. So they must not have, these are a bunch of elite slave owners, and, so they must have meant only white people or men, because they're the only ones that were equal, right? Because they had slaves. That's not what they meant. You see, there's a lot of this stuff that's going around, and it just lies, and it's confusing people. The people who wrote the Constitution were those who believed in the rights of all men. That's why they put it in the Constitution. Now, why do you suppose they would have done that? Because, you see, for about a generation, there were already slaves on this earth even before the Constitution. The Constitution didn't come along until 1776, but they had slaves over here since 1700. Now, I want you to understand, they wrote the Constitution because by divine providence, our Father in heaven had a plan that all men would be created equal. And he brought all these people from all around the world to be gathered to build up the kingdom of our Father through education and love and goodness. So what is the devil going to do to stop this? He's got to deceive us. So what does he do? He starts bringing in these slaves. Now, up to this point, human beings were just called Irishmen, Africans, Englishmen. They weren't called white people and black people. This is a whole new thing. The reason they started calling people white people and black people, because when they got over here, they needed to keep all these poor peasant white people, satisfied. They don't want them uprising, right? So they had to tell them, listen, you don't have anything. I mean, some of the white people had less than you can imagine. I mean, maybe a one wagon and a horse, a one-room cabin. They put everything in their wagon and traveled west and didn't even have a pot to piss in, right? So, I mean, they're eating biscuits and beans along the trail. They were not rich. They worked with their hands, and they were very poor peasants. So, what they did was they convinced them that at least they had their freedom. That was worth everything. If they didn't be careful, see, they could be a slave like these indigenous peoples. And so they just kept their mouth shut, and they said, okay, we don't want to be slaves, So they were told stories about, well, these black people, they'll rise up and they'll take all your property. So what we got to do is we got to have police. This is where the police were invented. Because they didn't want these blacks from Africa rising up and running off and being free and being enlightened. Because, you see, they needed to use these black people for slave labor. They needed their slave labor. So they started originally they started this thing where they would just called watchers. They would go out in the night and watch and make sure nothing bad happened. But what were they for? They were there to watch the property of the elite. Remember, these slave owners weren't white people. They were white, but that's not what defined them. What defined them, they were elite financiers. They had a lot of money. They came in there and bought up thousands of acres, and they had workers, manors. They were the husband or the owner of the manor. and they owned all kinds of women and slaves and people. These were the elite. And they weren't the same as just the ordinary white man. See, the ordinary white man didn't invent all these laws and didn't start slavery and didn't do all this. It was these certain individuals, these elite, that came in here to try and develop a system where they could have these slaves so they could work for them so that they could prosper. And they had to make lies and all kinds of things just to keep this little scheme going. So they started what they call police to make sure that there wasn't any uprising with the blacks. And then in 1860, when the blacks became free, they just carried this policing right on in and changed it just slightly to stop the uprising of blacks who didn't want to follow the Jim Crow laws and segregation laws, and they needed to keep them down and try to segregate them into these little communities where they could keep them away from intelligence and books, keep them on drugs, keep them in crime, and keep them ignorant. So what police were designed to do was keep the indigenous peoples, their slaves, down so they never learned who they were or how to get ahead, and figured out how to become equal to the other slave owners. They didn't want them to become like God, being enlightened with free agency and with the ability to live a happy and healthy life for their own interests, where they would lose them as slaves so they wouldn't be able to work for the elite. And this is what the police were always for, and it's what the police are for today. If you don't believe me, then just look at why are the police here. They're really there to protect the interests of the elite, right? They're there to say, hey, you need a permit for that. You can't operate and own a store, not unless we say so. You can't make money or buy and sell like we're doing. We're going to make it very difficult for you. Only the elite who made the laws can go out there and have this business and make all this money. Oh yeah, you're welcome to join the army, see, and die as a slave. You're welcome to come into the inner cities, get on drugs, and we'll come in there and smack you around and right segregate you off into this little area. This is segregation, Jim Crow laws, right? Oh, look at another one of them got away. You got to go over there and get him and beat him up and make it look like these guy's crazy and step on his head and then put him in prison. Piss him off. Just keep going in there and smacking them around and pissing them off. And once in a while they'll get mad and they'll come out of their little segregated area, and then we can show the whole world on camera just how crazy these guys are. Look, they're all crazy. Truth is they're out on drugs. They're out of their minds on these drugs that you fed them. They're poor. They've never had anything. There's no equality, no equity in this arrangement. They have nothing. And every so often they get mad. And they'll come out there and maybe between themselves they have an argument. And instead of going and disputing and being a judge between two brothers, what we do, we just bash them around, smack them around, take them to prison. See, all the laws were not created for some necessary... Think about this, friends. For thousands of years, we never had police. See, you think the Constitution is America that we know now. Most of what America is today is not about the Constitution. It's about taxes. You got to pay your taxes. That didn't start till 1913. So if you think, oh, we've got to have taxes, then what did they do before 1913? Pay all these taxes to make roads and schools. Well, all the schools are is a propaganda machine to keep you mentally down. They're not teaching you anything there. They're only teaching you just enough so that you know how to add and subtract, and you can do the work that they've asked you to do. You're a slave, and you need to continue to do that. Now, you see, places where you really learn is in the universities, but you're not allowed to get that. That's not for free. Only the elite get to go into the university and get these higher degrees. See, they're the doctors and the lawyers and the police chiefs and the politicians and stuff, and they're the rulers. See? So this is not what you think. Police aren't there to protect you. They're there to protect the interests of the elite, to make sure you don't get a permit so you can't buy and sell like they are. They got to protect, make sure, what are you doing? Selling something on the street? No, you can't do that. You're selling drugs? Only the pharmaceutical elite can sell drugs. They're the ones legal for that. Oh, are you selling booze? Oh, guess what? That's only for the elite to sell booze. Walmart sells a lot of booze. Guarantee. You can't sell anything unless you've got a permit. You can't even build your own house unless you've got a permit. Why is that? Because they don't want you building a house. They want you to go into the inner cities in their little slum shacks so that there's cockroaches running around and you get really, really, depressed and go on their medication so that you're controlled by their drugs. And ever so often, if you don't do what they say, they'll smack you around and put you in prison. All the laws are only geared to protecting the elite. That's what they always were. They're called slave patrol. That's what police were originally called, slave patrol. And then after 1860, they changed them to police. Why do we need police? People policing our streets. See, in our minds, they've convinced us that we're just not capable of controlling ourselves. We've got a police, we'll end up hurting each other. They're just there to stop us from hurting each other. That's not what they're there for. They're there to protect the elite's interests, to keep us from buying and selling, to keep us from getting out of our little cage and learning anything and going to a university and finding out information. They're there to disseminate the drugs into the neighborhoods and use that as a sort of it's kind of like blackmail. They'll let the drugs come in. They'll let you, out of the idea that maybe you can make some extra money selling drugs, then you start selling drugs, and then they can put you in jail. They've got this over on you at any time, unless you want to be a snitch, and then you got to work for them, sell out your brother. This is how the whole thing works. The whole judge court system is based on backroom deals and corruption. There's no real law. They just stick you in a jail cell and coerce you into signing a document saying you're guilty for something so they can keep you on probation and control you, possibly even force you to go on some sort of medications and drugs. This is the system that it's kind of evolved into. It all started with slave patrol. They don't want you having the ability to go out and build your own home, live on your own 2 feet, and provide for yourself. So there's all these laws about you can't build there or do this. Protect the interests of the elite. That's all the police do. And keep down any uprisings that these darn slaves might throw at them, right? If they go out in the street and start marching, we've got to take that down, right? Ever so often stage this phony event to try and keep everybody in fear. And now they're doing over there in the Middle East. They've invented this thing called ISIS. And scaring everybody and making everybody believe that, oh, these Muslims are terrible. Now remember, Muslims are usually almost exclusively either brown or black people. So now we've got all the indigenous peoples of the world are under suspicion. And Muslims were the most peaceful people in the world for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Only until the last few years when ISIS went over there and claimed to be Muslims and started bombing people. It was all created by ISIS, which is created by the CIA. Not created by Muslims. So this is a big fraud. So, you see, we were talking about how in the Dark Ages, when Europe had all these people, I mean, first of all, think about it. Some of these cities had a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people, and they didn't have police. They didn't have police until 16th century, 17th century. And then they were just little slave patrols. That's all they were. And then it developed into policing. So in the Dark Ages, they had these cities that where all the people lived in Europe and Asia. But over here in America, we find out that they had this big temple down here in these pyramids. They're not ancient. They're not 12,000 years old. They're just 1,000 years old. They're just, when the Dark Ages was going on, when the Catholic Church with the Nicene Creed were demanding that everybody worship the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost or they'd be executed, there was this temple over here in Peru. And these lines that represented these animal shapes and stuff that you could only see from the air. See, this was a spaceport. And Marduk was coming down here in his ship. And the reason why he was doing that is because over here there wasn't anybody and there's no people. It wasn't being written down in the history books. So he could get away with coming in and going out with his ships. And he brought just enough people over here to become slaves. This is what these people were when we arrived. They were just slaves. And these Aztec peoples were basically another one of their experimental races that they made for the use of slavery. So what Christ did when he came over here was he saw that Marduk had now shifted, because Christ, gave Europe enlightenment and schools and so forth. So Marduk came over to America and started having another group of slaves mine all this gold and silver and tin in South America. So what did Christ do? Come over here with some more armies and start killing them all? No. What he did was same thing. He came down and began to teach people, enlighten them, to tell them who they are, about their spiritual self, and about how he died for them and how he loves them. And they called him the Great Quetzalcoatl, which is the feathered serpent. And that's the same symbolism that he had always gone by. That carnal flesh that died and took on wings and flew out of the grave. He's the conqueror. He's the one who's coming back. And the Indian people say their Quetzalcoatl will return. Just as we know our Lord Jesus will return. And he taught them the gospel. And he said, now just love one another and teach these gospels and teach this good news to all the people. And so they did. And many of them started turning to Christ. You can read about this in the Book of Mormon. Okay, it's not the same group of people that was down in there in Peru or Mexico, but it's the same general thing that happened from the North American continent all the way down. Christ went and talked and preached to all the world. He didn't just preach to the Jews. But after Christ died, he went his way. And he preached to all the world and appeared unto every nation. And he appeared to the American Indians, and he appeared unto the Aztecs, and he appeared unto the Mayans. And they called him the Quetzalcoatl. And then they began to teach the gospel to everybody down there. And the enlightenment began to ensue. And this is why they had so many wars and wiped themselves out before the white man or the American or the Europeans ever got here. Now, that doesn't mean that the Christians took up arms against the slaves and so forth. What it means is that the evil and the wickedness that they had been taught, the deception that caused them to be slaves and work in the mines for Marduk, was being taken away from him because they were getting enlightened. Marduk didn't like that. This enlightenment was taken over. And they threw down their weapons and they decided, look, we're not going to mine this gold anymore. We're going to teach the gospel. And so Marduk came down there and massacred, just like they did in Europe, like the Inquisition. And you'll find this in your history books that they don't know where the Aztecs went. They just disappeared because Marduk got so angry that he started recruiting people to get involved in war and massacring and killing their brothers. And those who were Christians amongst the Aztecs and the Mayans, those who worshipped our Christ, Quetzalcoatl, they resisted, but they did not take up arms. And many of them were martyred. And to this day, their great civilization just sits there as a testimony unto the fact that the Book of Mormon is true. So, then the Constitution comes here, and the North American continent was preserved as a place for the gathering of all the peoples of the world and the gathering of Israel under the Constitution and under the guise of liberty and justice for all. And so now we're going into the last phase of this, and Marduk's really upset. Okay, the schools are here. You've got your liberty. Women are free. Okay, we're taking care of the hungry, and we're feeding the poor, and we're taking the gospel of love to all the world. So Marduk's got to do something. So he starts telling you, okay, well, the whole reason why we've got problems in the world is because of these darn Mexicans. These darn brown peoples, Muslims. If we could just get rid of all them, that's the reason why us white people have got all these troubles. It's these darn brown peoples. That's the problem. It's just brown people. If they weren't here, we'd be fine. They're trying to convince you But you see, this isn't coming from our Lord Jesus. This isn't coming from liberty and justice. It's not from the Constitution. They didn't create the Constitution for this, friends. All men are created equal. And everybody can follow the dictates of their own heart. And those rights and liberties cannot be usurped by a government. We've got a Constitution. We better stand up for it. And we need to stand up for the Constitution of the United States, because this is the last attack that will be done, and then we'll be free. And this last attack is to try and take away all the freedoms that we've gained through all the blood and all the tears and all the sweat and all the wars that we've had, and all the resistance that we put forward, and all the martyrs and everything that's gone down. It's all come down to this. We've got a Constitution, and we better defend it, because Marduk's really mad now. Satan is angry because we've got liberty and justice for all. And we're about there, friends. We're almost there. See, Jesus is almost returned. He's going to be born right here in our heart. We're finally almost there. Don't be deceived into start thinking that our only problem is all these Mexicans or Muslims or something. See, if you really want peace, world peace, start loving all these people and say, you know what? Our land is your land. My home is your home. I want to turn the other cheek. I forgive you. I love you. Because I know if I show you that I love you, you will love me back. This concept, well, if we just go over and kill them, an eye for an eye, that'll fix it. No. That's just endless war. That's just going to set us back 100 years. Friends, we're not going that route. We're going to love one another. These Mexican peoples have been here for a long, long time. In fact, they lived here before we got here. And they've got their mothers and their brothers and their sisters, 12 million of them that live in this country, and they've got relatives, and come on, tear down that wall. We don't need a wall. We need love. We need understanding and forgiveness, and you know, let's just say that we're as responsible, not us, the elite are more responsible than anyone else for anything and everything that's happened. And every time they find some immigrant that committed a crime, they're going to parade him across the television to try and convince you that we need to kill them all and just get rid of them. But you don't understand. If you round up 11, 12 million Mexican people, what are you going to do with them? Send them to Mexico? They don't live there. They don't have a home. You're going to throw them out in the desert and say, all right, get out of here. What about all their property and things that they own, and their cars and their homes and their mothers and their fathers? What are you going to do, friends? Think about it. Ted Cruz is wrong. Donald Trump is wrong. We're not going to save the world by more of the same. What we're going to do is improve the world by doing what we did the first time to improve the world. By making a constitution where we have liberty and freedom and justice for all, and love and kindness. Right? We're the greatest givers of all the world, right? We've been given our stuff. We got a little excess, we give to the poor, we give to the, just as long as, look, we don't need anything, friends, more than what we need just to live and be happy. And the one thing you're going to want soon, when all World War III starts raging, is just peace. And that's what we have right now. And all you got to do is turn to your neighbor and put your arms around him, and there's your peace. All you got to do is tell Trump, no, don't vote for Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, because they're all lying puppets. And let's find a third-party candidate. And let's take a look at Bernie Sanders, because at least he wants peace. And Bernie Sanders wants to take down these elite and make these elite bankers pay for the problems that we've got right now. Instead of us middle class bailing everybody out, this new reset that they're going to have is going to be all squarely upon the shoulders of the poor. We're going to be the ones that's going to suffer. And that shouldn't be the way it's going down. Look, somebody's going to have to suffer to get us out of this problem, because we're 20 trillion in the hole. And it should not be us, the people. Who put us in this position? It's the elite bankers, the financiers, the wealthy, the corporate leaders. They're the ones who should pay their fair share and get us out of this mess, because they put us here. So, I think we need to hope that Rand Paul gets into the race, friends. And if not, we need to vote for Bernie Sanders. And the thing of it is we've got a very short time. And the reason I don't have a lot of hope for Bernie Sanders is I don't think he's going to win. And we've just got a matter of a few days. And I don't think he's going to make it. So, we're going to be up against Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And I say we need to work now towards getting a third-party candidate. And I say Rand Paul. And if we don't do that, then we're going to be following some dictator who's going to be throwing out millions of these poor Mexican peoples, building a wall, isolationists, going to war with ISIS and destroying the rest of the world and building more of the same, and our world's not going to march closer and forward towards the marching of truth. It's just going to go backwards, friends. This is not our destiny to go backwards at this point. So we've got to get the word out, and we've got to do it now, friends. And I don't know what to say other than please get this information out to the people. So, friends, I'm going to go ahead and close and go ahead and upload this video, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. This here's David Vos. We'll talk to you tomorrow.